and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. The Lord is serious about community. Have you noticed? He is very serious about treating your neighbor with respect. And not just your neighbor, but especially those less fortunate than you. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Bible Study with me. This is Embrace the Question, and welcome to the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to subscribe. We're on our journey through the Bible, currently through Exodus chapter 22. If you haven't been with us long, we have already navigated the entire book of Genesis. Be sure and check those out. Leave those running in the background sometime when you're just doing some paperwork or something, and get the word in you, get the discussion in you. But Exodus 22 is truly the nitty-gritty of Exodus. Really, I mean, we've just done the 10 commands, right? The 10 commandments. The book of the covenant are the few books that follow, the few chapters that follow the giving of the 10 commands. So this book of the covenant are the little rules. They're sometimes a little bit tedious to read. Some have direct correlations to laws and rules that we have currently, modern day. So before we start, I want to make some observations here. One is that the law, especially in Near Eastern laws, there were two types. One was an absolute, like the 10 commands, absolutes. The others are casuistic in nature, meaning case law, case-by-case basis. Lots of little rules, but there could be deviations depending on the situation. These required judges. And judges, as you know, are a huge part of Israel's history. Moses was the first judge of Israel that walked among them, I should say, God being the judge from the beginning, but Moses truly the first judge. And then once, as we well know, once they arrive in the promised land, they are ruled by judges from that point on, starting with Joshua. Right now, Joshua is an understudy of Moses. So we have a lot of small laws being given. I say small. Lots of really interesting little rules and regulations. Just to reiterate, the point of the law is not to isolate Israel from the rest of the world, but to separate them, at least behaviorally, from the surrounding nations so that they can represent those nations to God. That's what a priest does, right? They represent a person to God. This is how this covenant relates to the Abrahamic covenant, because the Abrahamic covenant was to bless the world. This was God's idea, to bless the whole world, not to bless one group and curse everybody else. That's kind of a mindset we do get into at some time. Israel was supposed to be a kingdom or a nation of priests. We find out very soon that this isn't going to work maybe as planned. One observation I would like to make is that in the ancient Israel society, there is no such thing as secular. Everything is how we would define as religious. Without God, nothing happens. Nobody moves, nobody eats, there's no water. You get my point. He's giving the laws, and the judges must be God-fearing men. So we're going to find out that this whole division that we have in our society, this being secular, this being religious, there's no such thing in ancient Israel. The second observation is that the rule, eye for an eye, is not meant to be vengeful in nature. It's meant to make people more conscious of their neighbor. Because think about it. How would you go about living your life knowing that even an accident against your neighbor could be legally avenged? An eye for an eye. Axe head flies off while you're chopping wood, kills the neighbor. Their family's angry with you. They have a right to come after you. So we have to take precautions to protect our neighbor at all costs. That's what the rule an eye for an eye is about. So I think that's worth really reiterating, just because it's a shift. It's a shift from, oh, things were bad back then because, hey, everything was equal retribution. Revenge, vengeance is fine, saith the Lord. Not really true. That's not why it was given. So let's start with the text. We'll get through it, and I'll make a third observation. Okay, let's just read through these. We probably won't ponder too much on any one thing. Let's take a look. This is the English Standard Version. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun is risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. That meant he survived, I suppose, right? Verse 4, if the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. I do want to point out here that this is the rule of paying double, right? When you find the thief, the retribution is double. I've heard that brought up in the case of Job, who lost his family to Satan. If you remember the story, Satan comes down, he wipes out Job's family, his flocks, his herds, everything except his wife and his nagging friends. But in the end, God restores double to Job because the thief is caught. Interesting. And you can check up on that and see what all was restored to Job. But that's where this came from. That's where that idea came from. He shall pay double. Verse 5. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose, and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field is consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. We're starting to come along in our society finally with that same idea. Verse 7, if a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then if the thief is found, he shall pay double. Again, double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. Now you may be asking, how is this done? Well, we don't really know for sure, but at some point we know that there's such a thing called a Urim and a Thummim. And these are objects of some sort. In modern society, you can kind of think of them like dice. They weren't dice, but something that could be laid down and would supposedly be, the outcome is controlled by God to let the priest know yay or nay on an issue. Whether or not that was actually instituted at this time, we don't really know. It's not said. But there is some sort of direct word from God, because these parties shall come before God, and the one whom God condemns will pay double to his neighbor. Again, double restitution because we know who the thief is. Verse 10, if a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep safe, and it dies, or it's injured or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. So basically, again, God shines light on this situation. But if it is stolen from him, verse 12, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. Okay, verse 16. Again, these are a little tedious sometimes. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. This one just seems like out of left field. Again, you have to ask yourself, were some of these things problematic so that these laws had to be given? Apparently so, in some measure. Even one-offs, apparently, require the law. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. A phrase that we will see again in Scripture, devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Love that. Think about that one a lot. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear that cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows and your children fatherless. The Lord is serious about community. Have you noticed? He is very serious about treating your neighbor with respect. And not just your neighbor, but especially those less fortunate than you. If you lend your money, verse 25, to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. Wow. Love your neighbor. Verse 26, if ever you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. In what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. I can see the compassion coming through the law, can you not? You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer. From the fullness of your harvest and from the outflow of your presses, the firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Why? Because it was the firstborn that was the price for coming out of Egypt. It was the firstborn of all of Egypt that died in order to free Israel. So Israel gets out, but their firstborn now belongs to God, and that's where this is voiced. Verse 30, you shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day, you can give it to me. One more, you shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. You could really get pretty in-depth on some of these. I'm sure these last two particularly have a lot that could be taught about this. What's the big deal about being consecrated and eating what's been damaged? I mean, we wouldn't see anything wrong with that at all in our neighborhood, right? You have a cow that's been attacked by wolves or coyotes. He's damaged. Maybe he's dying. Probably going to shoot it and butcher it, probably. Not in that society, you won't. So definitely some interesting things to talk about, but let me give you now my third observation on this. The last observation I want to make to you is that these laws certainly appear to be towards the socially challenged, right? Because most of us would think these are no-brainers. If I back into my neighbor's car, I'm going to be responsible for helping him get his car repaired. But we both know, like common sense, common courtesy, neither sense or courtesy are really all that common. So I guess I understand the need for laying down these rules. And I guess I kind of agree with our reasons for having them even today, because we still haven't learned to take care of our neighbor. But the first 6 verses of this chapter are all about theft and property damage and how restitution should be made. Verses 7 through 15 are all contract and agreements and what to do when those things are broken. Verses 14 and 15 are all responsibilities of the borrower. So if you borrow something, return it, or if you can't return it in the same condition it was given or loaned in, then return one that's new or return one that's better. Again, common courtesy. The last 6 verses, 21 through 27, are social justice and care for vulnerable groups like the orphans, the widows, sometimes even the sojourners, those who wanted to be a part of the Jewish culture simply because they loved how they lived life. I think that's pretty neat. And God said, you have to take care of the sojourner because the sojourner, well, that was you. You were a sojourner in Egypt. So it's important to not discriminate against people. When someone deemed lesser than you or less fortunate than you comes in your midst, treat them with respect. I like this. I like the overall message. So, again, some of this stuff can be pretty tedious to read. But all that said, God has made it clear that from the beginning, he wants to bless the nations. He wants to bless the world, and he wants to bless the world through you and through me. Love your neighbor. Love God. Well, that didn't take too awfully long, so I hope you guys have an excellent week, and next time we will tackle Exodus chapter 23. You guys be blessed. Peace.